How do you test the voltage regulator on a Harley Davidson Softail? Catch you inside.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. So this video is all about finally testing the voltage regulator to see if it needs replacing or you've got another issue on the bike. Now for the M8 Softails, the voltage regulator test is actually accomplished really by two other tests. So if you watch my video up there about the AC voltage output test from the alternator, now that is one test to see if voltage is actually getting into the voltage regulator. If you watch my other video up there about how to test the battery and do all the test functions on the battery, you'll be able to tell whether output voltage and current is actually coming from the voltage regulator to the battery. So you'll either know that power is going to or from the voltage regulator. If either of those two functions are not working, then all that's left to do is a basic resistance ohms test in the cabling from the voltage regulator to the battery and to ground. And you're testing the power circuit test and the ground circuit test. Okay, you'll need a multimeter. I'm going to use this other one now because this is more accurate than my other one. My other one was playing up, so I think that's time for the bin. The link for the description for this is down below. So first is the power circuit test. So what we need to do is disconnect the DC output connector from the voltage regulator. Let's do that. And there it is. Now looking at it from here, the top hole is the positive, the bottom hole is a negative. If you look at the sheathing here, you'll see that the red cable, positive cable, is in there and it goes to the top one. Bottom one negative, top one positive. Okay, so the next thing to do is take off the seat so you can access the battery. Okay, so the next thing to do is set your multimeter to resistance or to ohms, and then you want to do a multimeter resistance test first of all. You basically put the two probes together and you read off what your ohms reading is for your multimeter. And mine is actually 0, so that's absolutely fine. Now, on my multimeter here, if there isn't a connection, if there's a break in the line and the circuit isn't completed, it will give you this value here. Basically, it's an open line. It's not registering anything. So if you're touching two ends of a cable, let's say, and you've got that basically says you've got a break in the line. When it's on resistance, there is a break in the line. It's the same if you do a continuity test and you put the probes on either end and you're not getting an audio sound. That's basically because you've got no continuity. Okay, so remember here, we're not really testing the voltage regulator because it actually isn't a test for the voltage regulator on the M8 Softails. It's really just by a power of deduction. You're seeing if there's input voltage, so the alternator is working. Is there output voltage to the battery? Yes or no? Well, if it's no, then you're basically testing the wiring. So what we need to do is just test the positive wire from the voltage regulator to the positive terminal on the battery first of all. And we're going to see for continuity or we're going to see for resistance. And we're basically looking for that magic figure of 0.5 ohms. If it's less than 0.5 ohms, then we need to do a ground circuit test. Okay, let me test it. Okay, so COM negative to battery positive terminal, and then the positive probe to the positive wire from the voltage regulator connector, which is 77B. So there we go, we can see there is 0 resistance. So that cable is perfectly intact. Okay, so the next test is the ground circuit test. So we're going to go off the ground 2, which could be off the chassis, or we're just going to go off the battery in this case. And then we're going to put the red probe on the negative cable or terminal on the voltage regulator connector. Right, let me do that. Okay, so that was less than 0.5 ohms, it was 0.1. So that means that line is intact. There is continuity there. So if you happen to have the electrical service manual of the Harley Davidson Softail, you might be a little bit confused here because you have to read it a couple of times to fully understand what it's trying to say. And I would say the wording is slightly ambiguous, but it isn't really. Essentially, it's a process of elimination. You're checking, is there input voltage, AC voltage from the alternator? Yes, okay, that's great. The next thing you're looking for is there output voltage from the voltage regulator to the battery? Yes, there is. So the question is it underpowering or is it overpowering? So if you watch that video again for the battery tests, essentially if it's going over 15.5 volts charging, then it is a problem with your voltage regulator. All this test here is just to make sure that the wiring from the voltage regulator to ground and also to the battery is actually intact and there isn't high resistance. Where does this really play a part? Well, let's say if it's undercharging your battery, you really want to see if there's some kind of high resistance in those cables going from the voltage regulator to the battery or ground. If there isn't high resistance, then the only reason you've got an electrical charging problem is your voltage regulator. And basically, that needs changing. So on other videos you might have seen people taking off the voltage regulator and actually doing a diode test and a forward bias, reverse bias test and everything. Actually, you don't need to do that on these now for the M8 Softails, because essentially it's a moot point. You don't really need to test for that because there's a problem with it. You can't change anything inside, you can't replace it, you just have to replace the whole unit. So essentially that's it. Whether it's forward bias, reverse bias, going through a diode issue, it's irrelevant really. That voltage regulator rectifier has to come out. You just want to know, is it getting voltage from the alternator? Yes. Is it providing under voltage or over voltage to the battery? Yes. Then you're just checking the cabling from the voltage regulator to the battery and ground to see if that's intact. That's it. So that's how you finally determine whether you need a new voltage regulator on your motorcycle. In truth, you'll know whether you need a new voltage regulator or not. You just do that battery testing, let's say, and you'll see whether it's being undercharged or overcharged, and that's really a great indicator. You can do the stator test, you can do the AC voltage output test as well from the alternator. But essentially, if there's a discrepancy there, the chances are it's going to be the voltage regulator. The only time, as I say, this cabling test here is relevant, in my opinion, is for an under voltage scenario from the voltage regulator. So you'll know whether it's a voltage regulator or whether it's a cabling that is creating that issue. The chances are it's going to be a voltage regulator. Right, anyway, hope you found that useful. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share. Check out the website RevelatorAlf.com. Check the Harley Parley page for that electrical data sheet, and hopefully you find that useful as well as a point of reference or a quick point of reference as well. Right, on to the next video. Ta-da!